Tonight at 10, dire warnings for the future of the planet as the COP27 climate conference begins in Egypt. Delegates are told the last 8 years have been the hottest on record, accelerating the effects of climate change.
We must answer the planet's distress signal with action, ambitious, credible climate action.
The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak arrived in Egypt this evening after reversing his initial decision not to attend. Also on the programme, Downing Street says Mr Sunak thinks offensive messages sent by Government Minister Sir Gavin Williamson are unacceptable. The devastated Ukrainian city of Mariupol, where an estimated 1,500 new graves have been found. We have a special report. And in the US, campaigning reaches fever pitch as the Democrats and the Republicans pull out their big names for the midterm elections. Good evening. The COP27 climate summit has begun in Egypt with dire warnings about the state of the planet. Extreme temperatures, wildfires, drought and flooding have all been made worse by the last 8 years being the hottest on record, according to the World Meteorological Organization. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has insisted the summit had to produce ambitious, credible climate actions. Our climate editor Justin Rolat has the latest.
Cyclones ripped through Madagascar earlier this year. Floods displaced more than 1 million people in Nigeria last month, while another year of low rainfall pushed parts of Somalia and elsewhere in East Africa even closer to famine. Our planet is sending a distress signal. The UN conference in Egypt was warned.
The last 8 years have been the warmest on record, making every heat wave more intense and life-threatening, especially for vulnerable populations. Sea levels are rising at twice the speed of the 90s, posing an existential threat for low-lying island states and threatening billions of people in coastal regions.
Rishi Sunak arrived this evening. The British Prime Minister will urge the world to move further and faster on the switch to renewable power. He joins representatives of more than 200 nations. It is essential progress is made, they were told today.
Whilst I do understand that leaders around the world have faced competing priorities this year, we must be clear. As challenging as our current moment is, inaction is myopic and can only defer climate catastrophe.
But expect heated negotiations. Egypt says the rich world needs to come good on its promises of cash to help developing countries cut carbon and adapt to our changing climate. And there'll be demands for money to help vulnerable nations with the climate-related impacts they are already experiencing, like the terrible floods in Pakistan that left a third of the country underwater earlier this year. The fear is the talks could be deadlocked. The Ukraine war has driven up food and energy prices worldwide. Developed nations are expected to say they don't have cash to spare.
Many times we've been given commitments and promises, but we haven't been given action. And of course, a promise that is broken, it kind of destroys the trust that we have in our leaders.
You don't have to go far from the coast in Egypt to find vivid evidence of what is at stake. The Red Sea is home to some of the most magnificent and biodiverse coral reefs in the world. But coral is incredibly vulnerable to climate change. Scientists warn virtually all the world's reefs are likely to be lost by the end of this century, probably sooner. There really is only one issue on the table here in Egypt, Rita, and that is cash. Rishi Sunak is expected to tell the 120 or so world leaders that will be gathering here tomorrow not to backslide on their promises of finance and support made at Glasgow last year. But developing countries are looking for more than $100 billion every year. You got rich, causing the climate crisis by burning fossil fuels. They've always said to developed nations, you need to help pay to solve it. Now, conversations about money are never easy, as we all know. So we are expecting some difficult discussions here in Egypt over the next few days.
Justin, thank you. Justin Rolat reporting. Downing Street says the Prime Minister believes that text messages sent by Sir Gavin Williamson to the Conservative MP Wendy Morton are unacceptable. A formal complaint and investigation were already underway before the expletive-laden exchanges were published in today's Sunday Times. Until this afternoon, Rishi Sunak said he was aware of the complaint when he appointed Sir Gavin as a minister, but not the content of the messages. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
Last month, a new Prime Minister, a new approach and a firm pledge.
This government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level.
On the same day, he brought his ally, Sir Gavin Williamson, back into government, 24 hours after he was told Sir Gavin was facing a potentially serious complaint about his behaviour. He sent Wendy Morton, a senior member of Liz Truss's government, a series of texts complaining in no uncertain terms about the treatment of MPs who hadn't backed the Truss leadership campaign, even accusing her of rigging the ticket allocation to the Queen's funeral, something she denies. A number of his messages contain expletives, and he warns there's a price for everything.
That's not acceptable. He shouldn't have said it. He has said that he regrets doing so. He has given some context, which was that this was at the time of heightened frustration.
Downing Street say the first time the Prime Minister saw Sir Gavin Williamson's texts was in a Sunday newspaper. And yes, Rishi Sunak finds their content unacceptable. But Number 10 won't comment further while the Conservative Party is looking into the official complaint against Sir Gavin. Rishi Sunak was already facing criticism for bringing Suella Braverman back to the Home Office despite her breaching the ministerial code. Labour and the Lib Dems are criticising his judgment. And a former Conservative minister questioned the wisdom of returning Sir Gavin to the front rank after he'd been sacked by Theresa May and Boris Johnson.
This is the third time under the third Prime Minister that Gavin Williamson has been generating bad headlines.
So personnel problems could threaten the Prime Minister's promise of a fresh start. Ian Watson, BBC News.
Let's speak now to our political editor, Chris Mason, who's in Sharm el-Sheikh. And Chris, the Prime Minister has spoken about this row for the first time.
He has, that's right, Rita. He gave an interview to The Sun on the way here to this summit in which he repeated that Gavin Williamson's behaviour was unacceptable and added, "I welcome that he has expressed regret." But the big question really is, given this kind of behaviour wouldn't be acceptable in any other workplace, why on earth is it acceptable in government? And strikingly, the Prime Minister, when pushed, didn't commit to retaining Sir Gavin after the conclusion of this investigation that is ongoing. So we'll have to wait for that to conclude and then see how the Prime Minister reacts. And of course, the context of this, as Ian briefly mentioned there, is that there was already criticism of the Prime Minister's judgment because he brought Suella Braverman back in as Home Secretary so soon after she had resigned from that very post. Prime Minister, though, has escaped the domestic fray. Well, the questions followed him here, didn't they? But he's escaped it for a few days, his first adventure onto the international stage as Prime Minister, having occupied every conceivable position as far as coming to this summit was concerned. No, I won't come. Maybe I will come. Oh, yes, I will. An acceptance, I think, that yes, this is a symptom of the turbulence of a Prime Minister new in office, now desperate to be seen to be credible, to restore the UK's credibility after such a difficult time. He'll also meet with the French President tomorrow to talk, yes, about climate, but also the issue of small boats. Plenty on the agenda in the next couple of days.
Chris Mason, many thanks. The southern Ukrainian city of Mariupol has been left in ruins after being subjected to fierce Russian bombardment early in the invasion. The city was besieged by Russian forces, and Ukrainian officials now estimate that at least 25,000 people were killed there. Analysis for the BBC by the human rights organisation the Centre for Information Resilience has discovered an estimated 1,500 new graves dug at the edge of the city. So what of the people who lived there? Our correspondent Hilary Anderson has been speaking to adult and child survivors from the city for BBC Panorama. They give vivid and distressing testimony, and there is a reference to suicide. Inevitably, you may find this upsetting.
Artem has seen what no child should. He was in Mariupol's theatre when it was bombed. His 2-year-old sister, Nastya, had to be dug out of the rubble.
И Настя молчала. Молчала, просто молчала. А Настя такая сказала: мама, а еще, там мы переступали трупы.
How do you grasp horror when you're 6? Mariupol, once a golden city, was left devastated after a massive bombardment. All spring, the city was besieged, cut off from the world. We've spent 6 months speaking to people who lived through it. Entire blocks of flats were turned into infernos. Around 90% of the buildings destroyed in Mariupol were homes. Ukrainian officials estimate 5,000 to 7,000 people were crushed beneath the rubble. Olga was an accountant before the war, married to Valery. She loved to dance. One night in March, she was sleeping in her cellar. Valery and her parents were upstairs when their house was hit.
Сквозь это все голос мужа. Оля, помоги мне. Откопай меня. У меня ноги наполовину были засыпаны, я не могла даже двигаться. Через какое-то время я услышала его сдавленный хрип, и все. И он замолчал.
As it got light, Olga was still trapped and alone.
Жить мне не хотелось на тот момент. Вот. И чтобы ускорить процесс, я нашла острый камень и сделала вот это. Я потеряла много крови, но прошло какое-то время, и я увидела, что кровь свернулась. И в этот момент я подумала о том, что, наверное, если даже и это не дало мне уйти, то, наверное, для чего-то я здесь нужна еще.
Finally, after 8 hours under the rubble of her house, she was pulled out by a cable attached to her leg. Olga was the only survivor of that night. For more than 2 months, each day brought terror. For women, for children, even pregnant mothers. This was Mariupol's maternity hospital. And this photo, one of the most disturbing images of the war. Her name was Irina. She was a local clothes shop manager, due to give birth in 3 days' time. Oksana, at a nearby hospital, tried to save her life.
Когда уже извлекли ребенка, ребенок был без признаков жизни. Ничего страшнее в своей жизни не видела. Это просто как мы запаковывали в черный мешок женщину молодую с ее ребеночком. Вот так вот ей под грудь положили.
More people were killed here than in any other European city since World War II. These are their graves. Artem lost his granny.
Когда умерла моя бабушка,
да,
я всегда сидела на окне, смотрела на облака. Ну, она выгинет голову свою. Значит, надо купить самолет, где можно открыть стекло и потрогать на ощупь.
Потрогать бабушку?
Ну да, на ощупь.
Ты думаешь, это возможно?
Возможно.
Hilary Anderson, BBC News.
And that panorama will be on BBC One at 9 p.m. on Tuesday. Now it's the last weekend of campaigning before voters in the United States take part in a major set of elections to elect members of Congress, known as the midterms. Congress is made up of two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Currently, the Democrats have a majority in both. But if the Republicans take control of one, President Biden will find it difficult to get his legislative program passed. The cost of living, abortion rights and immigration are issues that have dominated the campaign. The political map currently looks like this. And this weekend, the focus has been on Pennsylvania, a Senate race which is too close to call. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, reports.
Pennsylvania, where this election is so tight, the president himself is here asking for votes. And he's brought a friend, a Democratic double act.
Well, folks, 3 days until one of the most important elections, in our lifetime.
Pennsylvania matters because victory here could give either party a majority in the Senate, and this race is too close to call. So Democrats are raising the stakes.
Truth and facts and logic and reason and basic decency are on the ballot. Democracy itself is on the ballot. The stakes are high.
The campaign message that American freedoms are under threat concerns the committed Democrats who waited hours to see the presidential pair. What's on the line in this election if Democrats lose Congress?
Oh, our democracy is at stake. It truly is.
Why does Pennsylvania matter so much?
Because women matter, because our rights matter, because Black lives matter.
Presidents Biden and Obama can certainly draw a crowd, even though neither of them are standing for election this year. The results, though, they really matter to Joe Biden. They'll determine whether he can or cannot get anything done for the next 2 years. These results also matter to Donald Trump.
Well, thank you very much, and hello, Pennsylvania, one of my favorite places.
In the same state, on the same night, Donald Trump is blaming the Democrats for inflation, increased immigration and rising crime.
If you want to stop the destruction of our country and save the American dream, then this Tuesday you must vote Republican in a giant red wave.
Victory here for one of his hand-picked candidates, the TV celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, could spur Trump on to announce soon that he's running for president in 2024.
Could it be anybody?
In Georgia, another key state, there is an entire weekend festival devoted to shrimp and grits, a traditional southern dish that tastes better than it sounds. There's also a very tight race for the Senate seat. The Trump-backed candidate here is another celebrity, a former football player, Herschel Walker. He has said he supports a total ban on abortion, but his campaign's been rocked by two ex-girlfriends claiming he pressured them into having terminations. Had you heard the news stories about Herschel Walker?
Yep.
Would it put you off voting for him?
No, because he said it wasn't true, and it hasn't been proven.
I guess I don't count that kind of stuff because there's no proof. And I know this is such a volatile election that who knows what somebody will be paid to say.
In this incendiary atmosphere, when voters don't know what to believe and leaders warn of the violent threats to democracy itself, the election results may well just ignite further, potentially dangerous division. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Southern Georgia.
The Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has proposed a plan for cash grants to help homeowners badly affected by rising interest rates. He was making a speech following the cancellation of the party's conference in the wake of the Queen's death. Jonathan Blake has more.
Sir Ed Davey leads a party with only a small showing at Westminster, trying to punch above its political weight. Boosted by recent by-election wins, he came to rally Liberal Democrats in London today and attacked the Conservative government for the damage he said they had done.
Never again
can the Conservatives claim to be the party of homeowners. Never again can they claim to be the party of business. Never again can the Conservatives claim to be the party that balances the books. The Conservatives are the party of chaos.
Homeowners were paying a penalty after the mini-budget, he said, and called for those struggling with their mortgage to get financial support.
I'm proposing a new mortgage protection fund to cover the extra costs for those families seeing their payments rise most sharply, to protect them from falling into serious arrears or even facing repossession.
Sir Ed turned his fire on the new Prime Minister and again called for voters to have their say.
Rishi Sunak, your government does not have a shred of credibility left. It does not have a shred of legitimacy left. And if you had a shred of integrity left, you would call a general election now.
For a party sensing opportunity, that can't come soon enough.
Frankly, the people out there are demanding a general election. They deserve a general election.
Morale is riding high, especially after our 3 fantastic by-election wins recently.
Sir Ed Davey stepped up his attacks on the Conservatives in this speech, arguing the Lib Dems are best placed to beat them in certain areas. But the early general election he's calling for looks unlikely, so he and his party still face a fight to make themselves heard. 7 years after their coalition with the Conservatives ended, the Lib Dems hope a return to prominence, if not power, isn't far away. Jonathan Blake, BBC News, Westminster.
Time for all the sport now. Here's Lizzie Greenwood-Hughes at the BBC Sports Centre. Lizzie.
Thank you, Rita. Good evening. England's rugby union head coach Eddie Jones says silly mistakes were to blame for their surprise defeats to Argentina at Twickenham. They were beaten in their opening autumn international 30 points to 29, as Ollie Foster reports.
10 months might seem a long time, but the next few weekends will go a long way to deciding which England players will be lining up at the World Cup. This test against Argentina carried extra significance because they'll face the Pumas in France next year in their opening match. Joe Thockner-Singers had a tough time with injuries, but it was Argentina who'd have picked up a few bruises as they tried to stop him going over. Emiliano Buffelli kept Argentina in the game with his flawless kicking in the first half, and his try gave them the lead early in the second. They followed that score with another minutes later, Santiago Carreras with the breakaway. England responded immediately. Replacement Jack van Poortvliet spotted a gap and he powered through it. Despite that flurry of tries, the match was decided by the boot. Buffelli's 6th successful penalty saw Argentina over the line by a single point. The last time they won at Twickenham 16 years ago, the England head coach was sacked. Food for thought for Eddie Jones and his players who have already started the inquest into this defeat. Ollie Foster, BBC News.
Match of the Day 2 is on after the news with all the Premier League highlights, but here are the headlines. Arsenal are back on top of the table after beating Chelsea by 1-0. Elsewhere, there were wins for Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, Liverpool and Newcastle. Well, Arsenal are also top of the Women's Super League. Steph Catley scored straight from a corner kick in their 4-0 win at Leicester City. Rangers' hopes of winning the Scottish Premiership were dented at St Johnstone, who beat them 2-1. James Brown scoring a stunning goal. Rangers are 7 points behind leaders Celtic. It was another golden day for Great Britain at the Gymnastics World Championships, now their most successful in history, after teenager Jessica Gadarova battled through injury to claim gold in the floor event, Britain's 6th medal in total. Well, that's it. There's more on our website, including the latest from the Rugby League World Cup. Back to you, Rita.
Lizzie, thank you. And time now for a look at the weather. Here's Matt Taylor. Matt.
Hi there, Rita. Plenty of rain over the past week. You've probably noticed it's helped the rivers to respond. We certainly needed that rain, but it'll take a bit longer for some of the reservoirs to start to lift up once again. One or two, though, have had too much rain over the first 6 days of November. Let me take you to Kent and Sussex, where we've seen almost double, if not more than double, our normal November rainfall in just 6 days. And more showers to come here tonight and across other parts of the country as well. Still got some wet weather to come through this week, but looking brighter to the end of the week. Tonight, low pressure to the northwest of us is going to feed in, strengthening winds and more cloud around these weather fronts, which for tomorrow means for a mild start, a little bit of brightness in northern Scotland, eastern England, but often lots of amounts of cloud around around on Monday. Fairly grey day, rain coming and going for all areas. Heaviest and most persistent, Snowdonia, Cumbria and Dumfries and Galloway. Sunshine to end the day in northern Scotland. Bit of sunshine around the English Channel later on as well, but the breeze will be picking up. That breeze coming in from the southwest means it's another mild day, 12 to 15 or 16 degrees. But as we head to tomorrow evening, Wales, southwest, get ready. It'll be a pretty wild spell through the evening. Band of heavy rain and particularly gusty winds. That will sweep across all parts of the country. So you could have a few windows rattled through the night, Monday into Tuesday. Winds gusting 40 to maybe 60 miles an hour. But as we go through into Tuesday itself, we've got low pressure to the northwest of us still, but those weather fronts out the way, and it means a straightforward mixture of sunshine and showers on Tuesday. So ever-changing skies, there'll be some heavy thundery showers starting in the west, pushing their way eastwards through the day. But to us, it'll be another blustery day, another mild one. More sunshine and showers to come on Wednesday. But for the end of the week, I know Rita wants some dry weather. There will be some sunshine to go with it as well.
Good news. Thank you, Matt. That's it. Stay tuned for the news where you are. Good night.